Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you've joined us today to stay curious with some space history that will live forever. The first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, launched today in a vehicle that looked like this bulbous Vostok spacecraft, which means Vostok means rising sun, I believe. But we're going to talk about her wonderful mission, the only woman to fly solo in space. Like I say, we're glad that you've joined us here at the American Space Museum as we are in the birthplace of America's space age in Brevard County. And our museum is so proud to be part of that for over 20 years in Titusville. We've been downtown for about a little over 5 years in our museum facility. And for the other years, they've been in 2 malls and a couple other locations. So we're grateful that the American Space Museum and our U.S. Space Walk of Fame Foundation has found a home in your hearts as you stay curious with us. Marty Winkle, my co-producer and Streamlabs engineer now. We're approaching 600 episodes next week, Marty. So it's amazing over 2 years how we have garnered the attention of you folks out there, because we hope space geeks enjoy our program of space history, celebrating the shuttle era like none other, and astronaut birthdays. Of course, today we're going to I want to talk first about how we keep the doors open at our museum. Is we'll be having, double the fun there with Mark there, Marty. Good job.
Thanks, Anthony.
Our auction is a week from Saturday, June 25th. That's okay, Marty. I think two of me they can handle. Maybe not. But we have over 400 items for auction on our 20th memorabilia auction that Chuck Jeffrey, our collection analyst, as well as our American Space Museum Chief Operating Officer, has been doing this for us, and he now has a company called Bid Again Auctions that he's spearheading doing this. Over 400 lots, including, which you see there, an Apollo 11 crew signed insurance cover that will go for $3,000 to $5,000. I think it's up to $3,000 already. That's right. You can bid now. Go to American Space Museum website. Look up at the top. You'll see the auction. Click on it. It'll take you to the registration, and you can start pre-bidding on items. We've got, of course, an Apollo 17 firing room access patch there, dice below that Gene Cernan took to the moon. You've got a motor from a real Mercury, the real Mercury program. That's the escape motor that'd be on top of that lattice red structure on top of the spacecraft. And behind me here is an actual Rocketdyne motor that we're rocket engine that we're selling for a museum. So, but you have inexpensive things on there. Inexpensive, like maybe a little under $100 for some Mercury astronaut autographs. A lot of Moonwalker autographs on there. This is a very rich auction with a lot of great quality stuff out there to start your collection. And it's just fun to follow. We'll start at noon Saturday, January 25th, and go through these 400 lots in 7 or 8 hours until they're all gone. So check them out. Put your pre-bids in there. And like Chuck likes to say, our collection analysts bid till it hurts. So hope to see you a week from Saturday. You may come here and also participate in the auction live, or like I said, it'll be in our link that you follow in our homepage. Well, here's the lady of the day, forever known in history as the first woman to go to space on Vostok 6 in June 16th, and she stayed 2 days up, almost 3 days up there to the 19th. And we're going to tell you a little bit about part of this mission that nobody talks about. But she's 84 years old. There she's a picture above my head. She's been, of course, involved in the Russian Politburo since she first flew at age 26. There she is as a parachute jumper on the left of her left side there, and that's how she got chosen because of her expertise in parachute jumping. Well, why would that matter? I'm going to tell you in a minute, so stay curious. So we'll be celebrating Valentina and tell you a little bit about those early cosmonauts here. But first, Marty, we want to give a big shout out, as we love doing, to astronaut birthdays. Whoop, there we've got, oh, I'm going backwards. There we go. Happy 82nd birthday to Taylor Wang, born in China, but an American citizen, the first Chinese-born person in space. His only mission was STS-51B in 1985, Space Lab 3. And so we wish him a happy birthday, born in the Republic of China. But he became an American citizen, was working at the Jet Propulsion Lab when he became a payload specialist on the 7-day Space Lab 3 mission in May 1985. He later became a professor at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, and has written hundreds of articles, 28 U.S. patents on acoustics and bubble dynamics, all kinds of things about living in space. And his experiments, though he didn't go, his experiments went to other Space Lab missions up there. So happy 82nd birthday to Taylor Wang. Like we said, born in China in 1940. And we wish a happy birthday to Mr. Jeffrey Ashby, who's got the nickname Bones. And these nicknames usually come from their aviation career, and he was a Top Gun. So happy birthday to you, Bones Ashby. He is 68 years old, born in Dallas, Texas in 1954 on this date, June 16th, but he grew up in Evergreen, Colorado, which is on the outskirts of Denver, and graduating from the high school in Evergreen. The Navy Top Gun's first flight was as a pilot on STS-93, and he had the first woman commander, Eileen Collins, on that Columbia mission, deploying the Chandra X-ray telescope, one of the heaviest payloads that the shuttle put up to space. Ashby's later 2 flights were aboard Endeavour, STS-100 as a pilot, and then he was commander of Atlantis on STS-112, which were the 6th and 9th assembly missions for the International Space Station. Logging over almost 28 days in space, Ashby later got hired by Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin as the chief of mission assurance. And he still lives in Colorado. Here he is in the White Room, getting his gear on there by White Room guy number 4 and White Room guy number 6. And who Triple T will be here tomorrow with Tales from the White Room as the lead White Room technician over these gentlemen. And Triple T and I talked about it, and we're going to talk about wildlife on the launch pads at Kennedy Space Center, because it is a national wildlife refuge, and Triple T wants to tell a few stories about the critters he encountered out there, as all workers did out there in the 60-year history of Kennedy Space Center. So, in Cape Canaveral Space Force, I think, is 70 years old, actually. So happy birthday to those 2 astronauts, Taylor Wang, 82, and Bones Ashby, 68. Well, we're kicking off our little interest with Valentina Tereshkova with another cosmonaut whose name was Valery Bykovsky. He was launched 2 days on Vostok 5 before Valentina Tereshkova was launched. His call sign was Hawk, all right, and he was launched on June 14th. Now, this is the second time that the Russians had launched within days 2 cosmonauts, all right? Yuri Gagarin was the first man to go to space, one orbit. We all know that, April 12th, 1961. And then he was followed in August of 61 by Titov, all right, Germain Titov. And Germain Titov spent a whole day in space. He thought he should have been the first man in space because Titov was the most physically fit of all the cosmonauts. But that's why he was chosen for this one-day mission, because he was so physically fit and a little bit, not less fit, but maybe a little bit, Titov was like an acrobat. He was like one of these Ringling Brothers acrobats that could fly between the ropes and everything. So they gave their other top astronaut, Gagarin, the first trip in space. So, but then immediately in 1962 and 3, the Russians orbited their um, they orbited their third crewed man in space, which was named Popovich, and then they put up within a day their fourth spacecraft, and I didn't write down the name of that cosmonaut, Popovich, and then oh yeah, the third man in space was not Popovich. It was I got to get these names right here. Uh, uh, Adrian Nikolaev. Adrian Nikolaev was the third Russian in space, and that's important because jumping ahead, he married Valentina Tereshkova with a little bit of coaxing from the Russian premier Nikita Khrushchev. So we're going to talk about that in a second. And then they launched up uh, uh, their fifth mission by Bykovsky, and that's a picture of Bykovsky. And 2 days later, they put up Valentina Tereshkova. So the third and fourth missions of the cosmonauts, Vostok mission, were 2 in orbit at the same time. There was no illusion that they were going to rendezvous, except they wanted the West to think that they could rendezvous if they had. But they were just put up in similar orbits and came within 6 or 7 miles of each other. When they put Vostok 5 up with Bykovsky, shown here, and then Valentina Tereshkova, all right, shown there in the middle, they were within 3 miles of each other a couple times and communicated with radio communication. Well, this was a big PR stunt by the communist Russia, then the Soviet Union, to try to convince the world that they were way ahead of Americans on the race to the moon, because there was a moon race to go, who would be the first country to land. Bykovsky is there on the left, and that is Tereshkova, and of course Yuri Gagarin there on the right. Tereshkova and Gagarin were very good friends. He supported a woman going to space, and a lot of history is written about that they were very good friends, and he helped her in training. Here she is in her spacesuit. That CCP, United Socialist Soviet Republic, was put on a kind of a last minute on the astronaut's first flight of Gagarin. He had a white suit, and they just kind of put that CCP on there, and it became an iconic image of space, of course. Here she is getting suited up, an orange pumpkin suit, ironically, like the shuttle used, so they could be found easily if their spacecraft crashed somewhere. And there you have a couple of technicians outfitting her. And then I got another picture, rarely seen picture here, I believe, with a woman, or because I don't think Russians had men with hair that long, Marty. But this could be training. This could be the day of the launch. You don't know, because the Russian propaganda machine just printed on their news service TASS what they wanted the world to believe. So despite Tereshkova's success, it'd be 19 years before another woman would travel to space. And here she is. Here is a Russian drawing of that spacecraft that I have behind me on the green screen. It is a bulbous reentry vehicle that has a shroud over it when it's taken to space. I'll show this little model of it here, Marty. The second stage actually goes to space with the vehicle, and as you see by the engine on the back, and then the service structure is the green or dark area behind there, where all of the avionics, life support systems, and so forth, and it had a ring of other fuel and around there, though it was limited with moving around when it was attached to this the second stage that took it to space. But when it's ready to re-enter the Earth, it separates, and this falls back into Earth and burns up. And then the bulbous spacecraft itself, with the cosmonaut in it, all right, is weighted so that the heavy end of it has the protective re-entry materials so that it doesn't burn up in space. But It burns up through the reentry of the Earth's atmosphere, and when it gets 50,000 feet above the Earth's surface, the parachute comes out over the Vostok spacecraft, and almost immediately the cosmonaut ejects out in a MiG-style fighter jet ejection seat. And they watch their spacecraft underneath the canopy of the parachute while they hope their parachute comes out. They're in a rocket sled seat, and then they separate from the seat, and the parachute comes out, and they land on their own 2 feet. And this was kept a secret for at least 5 years from the Americans, and a lot of people didn't know this for a good 15 or 20 years, though it was written in a couple cosmonaut books, but they were in Russian and not translated to American. So until great space writers like James Oberg started investigating the behind the scenes, did we realize that none of the first Russians to go to space landed in their spacecraft. They all ejected out and landed on their own 2 feet. And there's some funny, there's a famous story of Gagarin landing, and he's in this spacesuit, and a farmer on the in Kazakhstan near where he landed is approaching this spaceman with a shotgun in his hand, and Gagarin famously says, "I am a man who comes from space, and I am a comrade. I am a Russian, so don't shoot me." And Valentina apparently landed. Not sure if this story's true. I read it in one place. Hard to substantiate these Russian legends. But when she landed on her own 2 feet, some, again, farmers went up to her, and instead of waiting around for the rescue helicopters and so forth, she went in their house and ate a meal real quick. She was in space for 3 days and complained about the food. Her first few hours in space, like most astronauts or cosmonauts, she had space sickness, meaning she was dizzy and vomited and not disoriented, but just had trouble getting used to space. But when she was up there for 3 days, she enjoyed talking to the communist bloc countries. Here is a depiction of that landing. Marty, you can blow that picture up for me, please, sir, so people can get a good look at this little bit of artwork that I found as the Vostok has landed, or is under its umbrella anyway, and she is landing. Now, Bykovsky landed about 4 hours later. So he spent over almost 5 days in space, which was the longest mission to date. All right, she was up there over 3 days. This photograph gives you another schematic view of the Vostok spacecraft, so cramped, all right. And then the Voskhod, H-O-D version of this was the same size, and they stuck 3 people in that, all right, without spacesuits as a publicity stunt that Khrushchev pulled, okay, but Khrushchev was ousted from power during the middle of that, and Brezhnev took over, and they brought those 3 cosmonauts down safely almost immediately. By the way, the Soyuz spacecraft still uses a bulbous reentry vehicle, and there is that's in the middle of the 3-part section, and there's another bulbous craft that is like the living room on the front of this. And so the living room or other science quarters it was used for detaches with the service module, leaving the bulbous vehicle, much like, and we've been doing that for 40 years on the Soyuz spacecraft, much like keeping our Apollo command module around 40 years, which I wish we had done. Then we could have maybe saved some astronauts in the Columbia incident. Here is Tereshkova, supposedly in space, sampling some food. All right, she took pictures and enjoyed herself. Talking, there is the Vostok bulbous spacecraft. You can see where the reentry has burned away the ablative shield on that. And her spacecraft is sitting in a museum in Moscow. And I have seen the one at the Cosmospheres, the only close-up look at a Vostok that I've made. And you look inside that, and you're just going, oh my gosh, you know, it is, there's no room for nothing inside of there. This is Valery Bykovsky, who became a very famous Russian. He's one of the, these are like our Mercury astronauts. his fame was equated with being a Mercury astronaut, except he had two other space missions, including a week-long stay on the space station Salyut 6. So there he is. He died at age 84 a couple years ago. And like I say, certainly enjoyed fame. Baikovsky did, as is Valentina Tereshkova. Here's the two of them together celebrating their dual flight in space. Once again, the first 6 Soviet missions to space. Gagarin first. Then they put up there for one day was Titov. And Titov was 26, and Titov was the youngest man to go to space yet. All right. Though Gagarin was 27, Valentina was only 26 years old, but Titov was 25 when he went to space. And still the youngest person to go to space outside of those suborbital astronauts who went to space, okay? I think there was, what, Marty, a 20-year-old or 18-year-old?
I think it was 18.
Yeah, 18 that young man was. We're talking orbiting the Earth, all right, as a distinction to the wonderful suborbital flights that we're going to be experiencing by the hundreds in the next 5 years, I guarantee it. So then Gagarin, Titov a day. Then they, in two missions, twice they put up 2 spacecraft at the same time to shock the world with publicity. We've not got one, but we've got 2 cosmonauts orbiting the Earth. And though they didn't rendezvous or dock or anything like that, it was really, we didn't know what was going on because it was so secretive. Yet here in America, everything is open. You had the news services, ABC, CBS, and NBC doing their jobs to find out all they could about. Not in Russia. They told you what they wanted to tell you in the old Soviet Union. Well, I wanted to tell you that Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of Russia, right there in the middle, he, of course, is famous for wielding his brutish power, actually taking his shoe off and beating it at a United Nations meeting during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But here he is with the 2 stars after they came back from that 2 spacecraft orbiting the Earth there. And he really enjoyed the cosmonauts. He controlled the program, asking the leaders to do things that they really didn't want to do. And including maybe here, of course, you have the cosmonauts there. Valentina came back. Don't know why she didn't have a military uniform on there, but she's there with the 4th man in space, Popovich, and of course Gagarin there on the left, and on there. So we are a very and they would have a red square parade and everything for all the cosmonauts. We didn't do that for all the cosmonauts. We did it for John Glenn, and then we didn't do it for any of the more Mercury astronauts. But of course we did it for the Apollo 11. Had a lot of ticker tape parades around the world. Well, Khrushchev came up with an idea. Hey, what if I have the 3rd man in space, Nikolaev, and the first and only woman in space so far, okay, Tereshkova, fall in love and marry each other? So he orchestrated that, probably wrote him a big fat check. I know he gave him a big apartment in Moscow overlooking Red Square, and so they were married on November 3rd. I think it was 1966 or somewhere in there. And they stayed together for about 12 years. They had a daughter who was born during about a year and a half after her flight. And her daughter's name, I was looking for that. I had it right here in front of me. Oh, yes, Elena. And she's the first person with both a mother and father who has traveled to space. So they got the propaganda over this space baby that was born on June 8th, 1964, just less than a year after her space flight, okay? But this arranged wedding was a fairy tale message to the country. It was November 63. I forgot that they got married that close after her flight. Khrushchev presided at the wedding. And top government and space officials were invited to it, and it was quite an event to show the world this fairy tale romance. Tereshkova was chosen to go to space as a woman for propaganda purposes. Though women were very well qualified in the Mercury program, were some 13 women that were being trained at the time, and one of them was one of the premier flyers of aviation, Jerry Cobb, and Jerry Cobb, a famous American aviator. Was one of the early lady trainees that were in training, and she kept lobbying the Congress that a woman should go to space, and but Congress's opinion was it seemed like a publicity stunt, and we're not using women for publicity stunts, and that's from the feminist scholar Betty Friedan. I've also heard that NASA did not want to orbit women in space because if one got killed, they thought that would be a horrible image to portray to motherhood, and they didn't actually think Americans would take it seriously enough if women were in the Mercury program, such as it was the chauvinistic views of 60 years ago. Well, let's look at a couple things about Valentina. Oh yeah, I got to mention. I kept saying she joined a parachute club. All right, and did over 160 parachute jumps. Okay, and the other woman that was her backup was also out of this parachute club. So this training was very vital to them surviving the reentry and so forth. After being launched in a rocket that Valentina called the rocket launch was shivering with the force of liftoff, shaking like a thin tree under the wind, with a roar like thunder. All right. And her 48 orbits and 70 hours in space, she did speak to Nikita Khrushchev, the premier, as well as all of the communist bloc countries that were the satellite nations. But get this, a couple interesting things. Let's get off her wedding picture there, Marty. Let me go to, there she is with Gagarin, who she was very good friends with Gagarin. And there she is again to remind you that the spacecraft there. And there's a pretty picture of her in her spacesuit there with her hair made up. Imagine this. She goes to space, and her mother didn't know anything about it, all right? In fact, she came from nothing. Valentina Tereshkova, born and raised literally in poverty, all right? And then become one of the most famous women in history, and of course the Soviet Union. Her father died in 1939, and she left school at age 16 to work in a tire factory and then a mill. She was fascinated with mill work, and then she learned how to parachute, and the infrastructure of the cosmonauts was looking for that. And with Yuri Gagarin supporting her, she became a cosmonaut. She never escaped her own legend, okay? Constantly being in demand, a postage stamp, stained glass windows, plaques, stationery, statues, everything as a tribute to her in her homeland there. So a woman did not go to space again for 19 years, all right? That's bad. That's sad, okay? But the second woman to go to space was, of course, a Russian, because we had hired 6 women in the space shuttle program to go to space, and Russia wanted to pull off the first women spacewalk. So they put Svetlana Savitskaya was the second woman to go to space in 1982, all right? And then she went up for a second mission to do a spacewalk. And that was 8 months later, Sally Ride went to space, okay? 2 years later, Savitskaya became the first woman to walk in space. And our first woman to walk in space, Kathy Sullivan, did that a few months later also. So Russia always wanting the propaganda machine to prove to the world that their way of life was a superior way of life, simply put. A couple other things about it. Like I said, her mother did not know she was in space, all right? when the press started saying there is a woman in space. Her name is Valentina Tereshkova. Her mother did not believe the headlines, responding to the news by saying, "No, my daughter's just a parachute jumper. She could not be aboard this spaceship." But she was, and forever etched in space history. What I think is very interesting, Marty, is that she's the only woman to go solo in space, all right, in 59 years. When will that change? Well, when we have these Star Wars type fighters that can go to space and come back, then maybe we'll have a woman pilot be solo. But there's no reason to, because we don't want to send people by the space by themselves. We want teams to go up there and do things together. And here she is, a very recent picture of Valentina Tereshkova, 84 years old. She is on record, Marty, as saying she would volunteer for a one-way trip to Mars. I want to find out whether there is life. I want to find out whether there was life on Mars or not. And if there was, why not? Why did it die out? What sort of catastrophe happened? I'm ready to go and die there. Okay, so there you go, Elon Musk. You can put her on your spaceship to Mars up there. So enjoy this look back at Valentina Tereshkova. Hope you've enjoyed that, Heather Edel and Jean-Luc Clintage. All right. Mark Usiak is watching from his workplace, and his brother Tom is watching from the beach where he's at over on the Carolina coast. Thank you, Carlton Bailey, and James Michael Sigler for watching. Of course, our Michiganders, Dave Stangy's up there. We've got Joel Moles watching. Thank you, Joel. That's a new name to us up here. And Marty put down a Chinese characters for me, Marty. Thank you. Is this I'm gonna? I'll bet he reproduced them just exactly right as they're on there. Thank you, Charlie. So we've got a Chinese watcher, male or female, as we talk about the Chinese astronaut. Could be Japanese or Korean, Marty says. He doesn't have those block figure dialects down yet. But we love everybody watching. Jean-Luc Clintage, okay? And we appreciate your comments. Give us a shout out where you're watching us from, because we like to know that we have Stay Curious listeners all around the world, like Robert Law is probably watching on his big screen TV on YouTube. And we know that Ophelia is watching from Normandy, France. We to you, young lady. Hope you're having a wonderful Thursday night there in Europe. So, I'm trying to think if all the little tidbits about Valentina have been uttered by me. I think it's just so fascinating that the whole world was duped about these guys landing, okay, but they didn't. They in their spaceship, they landed on their own 2 feet. So Marty, that makes who would be the first person to leave space, orbit the Earth, and land in their own spaceship? John Glenn, of course. And of course, Gus Grissom and Alan Shepard, the second and first man in space, as I say it backwards, landed in their own spaceship. But John Glenn's truly, and what's the big deal about this? Well, the Federal International Aviation Association might not have deemed that as a true space flight, which they define as leaving Earth and landing in your spaceship back on Earth. So I love touting John Glenn, one of the 25 Ohio Knots, who I met personally as a Cub photographer for the Associated Press when he was senator there. So, Marty, we've got any other business to take care of? Yep. We got a good program Triple T and I are putting together for you tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge and all those critters that wandered on to various paths during Triple T's career. Of course, during the whole space program, you had armadillos, turtles, snakes, lots of deer, all right? And so, Carlton Bailey, thank you for getting together some photos of your experience with that. Carlton's only, I think, been a participant of over 700 rocket launches. So we'll be sharing some of those images with you. And yes, Mark Usiak, if you got some critters on the pads, send me a couple there, okay? Because I know he doesn't want uh, Carlton to outdo him there. So, Marty, did you say something else?
What is bobcats and deer, hogs?
Oh, hogs. Yeah, a lot of hogs. Yeah, the deer, hogs. What else?
Cat,
Bats.
bobcat.
Oh, bobcats, huh? You seen a bobcat out there,
Oh,
Marty?
yeah.
Marty says, "Oh yeah, I seen bobcats." So, I think so. We'll have some stories about that, including maybe a story about just a couple eyes looking in the dark, looking back inside the crawler. I've heard that story from Triple T before. So, thank you for everybody for being a Stay Curious watcher. Tell your friends to please watch us on YouTube and Facebook. We've got over 590 episodes on Facebook, and we've been broadcasting since July on YouTube, where we've monetized the channel, and it's so important for us to subscribe and watch our programs on YouTube, as we do make a few, not many, but maybe 40 cents an episode or what. It all depends on you watching those ads and so forth. So thank you for all you do, Marty. Thank you, Karan Conklin, our executive director, for supporting our program here in front of our board of directors. It has been a true outreach that we did not expect. So we hope for you to come back tomorrow with Triple T. Until then, I'm Mark Marquette saying, please come to our museum and bridge the space between us.